Stop what you're doing and find something metal near you. Touch it. Feel how solid it is. That solidity is a lie. You're not actually touching anything. What you're feeling right now, the pressure on your fingertip, is electromagnetic repulsion. The electrons in your skin are pushing against the electrons in the metal, and neither one ever makes contact. Everything you think you know about touching the world is actually about forces pushing through emptiness. And magnets? Magnets are just the moment when this invisible truth becomes undeniable, when you can actually feel the emptiness push back, ready to have everything you thought was solid fall apart. Here's what nobody tells you, and this is the thing that's going to change everything about how you see the world. The misconception about magnets isn't a physics problem, it's a philosophy problem. It's about how you've been taught to think about reality itself. You've been taught that understanding something means translating it into familiar terms. That explanation means making the strange into something ordinary, something comfortable, something that sounds like the other things you already know. But this is exactly backwards. This approach doesn't bring you closer to reality. It pushes you further away from it. It trains you to reject wonder in favor of comfort. And magnets expose this more clearly than almost anything else in nature. The pain you don't know you're experiencing is this. You walk through a world full of invisible forces. Gravity, electricity, magnetism, love, connection, all of these things you can't see but you can feel. And you've been taught to trust only what you can reduce to mechanical terms. Little gears turning, little hands pushing, little billiard balls bouncing off each other. This makes you feel disconnected from reality, numb to mystery, suspicious of anything that can't be flattened into analogy. What this video is going to do for you is show you that the unsatisfying answer is actually the doorway to genuine understanding. That confusion isn't a sign you're failing. It's a sign you're finally paying attention, that magnets aren't refusing to be understood. They're inviting you to understand in a completely different way. By the end of this, you won't just understand magnets differently. You'll understand understanding differently. You'll see that science isn't about killing mystery. It's about falling deeper into it with better questions. And you'll walk away with a single tool that changes how you see every unexplainable thing in your life. The permission to let something be exactly what it is, without needing it to be something else first. This isn't about magnets. It's about reality. Let's go. I need to tell you about the worst question I was ever asked, because it taught me everything about why we struggle with magnets. Why we struggle with understanding anything fundamental, really. I was at a family gathering. I must have been in my 30s, already well known in physics. My name was in the papers. I'd worked on the atomic bomb. I was teaching at Caltech. People knew who I was. And my aunt comes up to me with this proud look on her face, like she's about to stump the genius. She's holding 2 refrigerator magnets, one in each hand, and she says, "Richard, explain to me how these work. And don't use any fancy physics words. Explain it in plain English so I can really understand." Now, you have to understand, my aunt was a kind woman. Sharp, curious, genuinely interested. She wasn't trying to trap me. She wasn't being mean. She really wanted to know. But her question was rigged from the start, and she didn't even know it. The question itself was broken, because what she was really asking was this. Translate magnetism into something I already understand. Something mechanical, something I can picture with little gears or pushes or pulls that work like hands pushing. Give me a story that feels like the other stories I know. Make it comfortable for me. But here's the problem, and this is the heart of everything I'm going to tell you today. Magnetism isn't like anything else you already know. It's fundamental. It's one of the basic forces woven into reality. It's part of the fabric. Asking me to explain it in terms of something familiar is like asking me to explain red by comparing it to other colors. At some point, red is just red. You either see it or you don't. So I tried anyway, because I loved my aunt and I wanted to help. I told her about electrons spinning, about magnetic fields extending out from the magnet into space, about how like poles repel and opposites attract. And I watched her face while I talked. She was nodding, doing that thing people do when they're trying to look like they understand. But her eyes were glazed. She was collecting words without touching the thing itself. Finally, I stopped and said, "Can I ask you a question? When these magnets pull together, can you feel the force?" She said yes. I said, "That's it. That's magnetism. You're experiencing it right now. What you're feeling is one of the fundamental facts of reality. It doesn't reduce to anything simpler because there isn't anything simpler. It's the ground floor. This is where you hit bedrock." And she looked so disappointed, like I'd refused to answer, like I'd held back the real explanation, the secret knowledge I was keeping to myself, like I was being difficult on purpose. That's when I realized something profound. We've been trained to believe that understanding means translation, that if you can't express something in terms of something else, you don't really get it. That explanation has to keep going deeper forever, unpacking each thing into smaller things, until you get to something so familiar and comfortable that you don't have to think about it anymore. But this is backwards. The deepest understanding is when you can experience something directly without needing the comfort of analogy. When you can stand at the fundamental level and say, "This is real, this is basic, this is one of the ingredients the universe is made from. Magnets work by magnetism." And that's not a dodge. It's not me being coy or difficult. It's an invitation to stop translating and start experiencing, to stop demanding that reality fit into the shapes your mind was trained on and to reshape your mind to fit reality. Let me tell you another story, and this one's going to sound strange at first, but stay with me. Imagine you're born into a room where the air is filled with invisible strings, thousands of them, millions of them, crisscrossing in every direction, made of something you can't see or touch directly. You don't know they're there. You've never seen them. But you notice something strange happening. Certain objects, when you bring them close together, move in ways that don't make sense. They pull toward each other across empty space. They twist and align without touching. They seem to be connected by something you can't perceive. You spend your whole childhood trying to figure out why. You create theories. Maybe there are tiny invisible hands reaching out. Maybe there's wind you can't feel. Maybe it's magic, some kind of supernatural force. You come up with all kinds of explanations, and none of them quite fit. Then one day someone gives you iron filings, just ordinary iron filings like metal dust, and they tell you to sprinkle them near one of these special objects, and suddenly you can see the invisible strings. The filings arrange themselves in curves and lines, following the contours of something that was always there but never visible. You've just made the invisible visible. It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen. These elegant patterns, these curves sweeping out from the magnet, showing you the shape of something you could only feel before. You've made a map of the invisible. But here's the thing, and this is where most people make the fatal error. The iron filings aren't the strings. They're just showing you where the strings are. The actual thing, the field, the force, the magnetism, is still invisible, still untouchable, still fundamentally mysterious. And this is where most people make the mistake. They start to believe the iron filings are the explanation. They think that because they can now see a pattern, they understand the thing itself. But the pattern is just a map. The territory, the actual magnetic field, is something else entirely. This is the misconception. We confuse our tools for measuring reality with reality itself. We confuse our descriptions, our models, our little stories, with the actual phenomenon. And magnets expose this confusion because they force us to confront something we can feel but never fully visualize. The magnetic field is real. More real than the table you're sitting at, in some ways. Because the solidity of that table, the fact that your hand doesn't pass right through it, That's electromagnetic forces. That's electrons in your hand repelling electrons in the table. The table is mostly empty space, you know. If an atom were the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be like a marble at the center, and the electrons would be tiny specks orbiting at the outer walls. Everything in between is emptiness, but you can't see the field, can't touch it directly, can't reduce it to little mechanical pictures that satisfy the part of your brain trained on Newtonian billiard balls and clockwork mechanisms. So what do you do when reality refuses to fit into the shapes your mind was trained to recognize? You have two choices. You can demand reality reshape itself to your comfort, which is what most people do, or you can reshape your understanding to meet reality where it is. You can expand yourself to accommodate what's actually true instead of shrinking truth to fit what's comfortable. Magnets are asking you to choose. Every time you play with them, every time you feel that invisible force pulling or pushing, they're asking, are you willing to let me be what I am? Or do you need me to be something else? There's a story I love about a child, maybe 5 years old, who keeps asking why. Every answer leads to another why. You know this game. Every parent knows this game. Why do magnets stick to the fridge? Because the fridge is made of metal. Why does metal stick to magnets? Because of magnetic fields. Why do magnetic fields make things stick? Because of the way electrons are arranged. Why are electrons arranged that way? Because of quantum mechanics. Why does quantum mechanics work that way? And eventually, if you're honest, you hit a wall. You reach a point where the only truthful answer is, because that's how reality is built. That's one of the rules of the game we're playing in. That's the ground floor. Most adults hate this moment. They feel like they've failed, like they should be able to keep going forever, explaining each thing in terms of something deeper. But this is a misunderstanding of what explanation even is. Science isn't an infinite regression. It's not turtles all the way down. It's a process of finding the fundamental rules, the axioms, the ground floor, and then showing how everything else builds up from there. And magnetism? Magnetism is one of those ground floor truths. It's in the foundation. When the child asks, why do magnets work? The honest answer is, magnets work because the universe includes a force called electromagnetism, and that force is one of the 4 fundamental forces that make up everything you see. It's not made of anything else. It's one of the ingredients reality is made from. But we're so uncomfortable with this answer. We want to keep digging. We want to find the real explanation underneath, the thing beneath the thing. And this desire, this refusal to accept that some things are fundamental, keeps us from ever truly understanding. The deepest wisdom isn't in knowing everything. It's in knowing where the bottom is, and having the courage to stand there without needing to drill deeper. To say, this is fundamental, and that's okay, that's enough. So now you're standing at the edge of this ground floor, staring at something fundamental, and maybe you're uncomfortable. Good. That discomfort is the feeling of your brain rewiring itself. That discomfort is growth. But there's something even stranger I need to show you, something about what happens when you actually accept that magnetism is fundamental instead of fighting it. Here's the first thing you need to understand. Explanation and translation are not the same thing. When you ask how does a magnet work, what you often mean is, translate this unfamiliar phenomenon into something that fits the models I already carry in my head. You want me to tell you a story about magnets that sounds like the stories you know about other things, gears turning, hands pushing, dominoes falling. You want the comfort of recognition. But translation always requires a prior language. And if magnets are fundamental, if they're part of the base language of reality, then there's nothing more fundamental to translate them into. Think about it this way. How would you explain the color red to someone who's never seen any color? You can't compare it to blue or green because they don't know those either. You can talk about wavelengths of light, about the cone cells in the eye, about neural processing in the brain. But none of that is the experience of red. The redness of red is irreducible. It's fundamental to visual experience. Magnetism is the same. It's fundamental to physical reality. So when I say magnets work by magnetism, I'm not dodging the question. I'm giving you the most honest answer available. I'm saying this is one of the basic forces. This is part of the alphabet that reality is written in. Everything else is spelled with these letters. And here's the profound part. Once you accept this, explanation doesn't disappear. It transforms. Instead of asking what is magnetism like, you start asking what follows from magnetism being real, and that question opens up an entire universe. We can map magnetic fields with incredible precision. We can predict how magnets will behave in any configuration. We can use Maxwell's equations to describe electromagnetic phenomena with stunning accuracy. We can build motors and generators and MRI machines. We can do extraordinary things. Not because we've translated magnetism into something familiar, but because we've accepted it as fundamental and explored its consequences. True explanation isn't about making the strange familiar, it's about making the fundamental usable. Now let me show you where this misconception does the most damage, when we confuse our models with the reality they describe. Those iron filings I mentioned earlier, the ones that show you magnetic field lines, they're beautiful, they're useful, they help us visualize something invisible, but they're not the magnetic field itself, they're a representation, a map. And here's the trap. The human mind loves maps. We love taking something complex and invisible and turning it into something we can see, touch, manipulate. We create diagrams with little arrows showing field lines. We draw pictures of electrons spinning. We build conceptual models with north and south poles. All of this is useful. I use these things. Every physicist uses these things. But somewhere along the way, we forget these are tools. We start believing the map is the territory. We start thinking the little arrows we drew are the field. We think our story about spinning electrons is what electrons are actually doing, but it's not. The electron doesn't know it's supposed to spin. It doesn't have a little axis it rotates around like a planet. The magnetic field doesn't flow along the lines we drew like water in a pipe. Those are human inventions, ways of organizing and predicting phenomena. They're extraordinarily powerful inventions, but they're still inventions. And this confusion, this conflation of map and territory, is what makes people feel unsatisfied with real explanations. Because when I tell you magnetism is a fundamental force field, you're comparing that to your mental model of force fields, maybe from science fiction, maybe from simplified diagrams you saw in school, and your mental model has all sorts of mechanical pictures attached to it, little arrows pushing and pulling like invisible hands. But the actual magnetic field isn't mechanical. It's not made of little arrows. It's not made of anything you can point to and say, there, that's the stuff fields are made of. It's itself. It's a feature of space-time that causes charged particles to behave in specific, mathematically predictable ways. And no picture, no model, no story can ever be that thing. They can only point toward it. The wisdom here is subtle, but crucial. Hold your models lightly. Use them, enjoy them, let them guide your predictions. But never mistake them for the thing itself. Reality is always wilder, stranger, and more subtle than our best maps of it. I'll give you an example from my own life. When I was working on quantum electrodynamics, I developed these diagrams. They're called Feynman diagrams now, which is kind of embarrassing, but that's what they're called. And these diagrams are ways of visualizing particle interactions. Little squiggly lines for photons, straight lines for electrons, vertices where they meet. They're incredibly useful. You can use them to calculate probabilities, to predict outcomes of experiments, to organize your thinking about complex processes. And they work beautifully. I got a Nobel Prize partly because of how well they work. But here's the thing I always tried to make clear. The diagrams aren't what's actually happening. They're bookkeeping devices. They're ways of organizing calculations. The electron isn't actually traveling along that line like a car on a road. The photon isn't actually a squiggly thing. These are representations of mathematical relationships, and they're incredibly useful representations, but they're not pictures of reality. And yet, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people, even physicists, start to believe the diagrams are real. Start to think that's what particles are actually doing. The map becomes the territory in their minds. This is so easy to do. Our brains are wired for it. We're pattern-matching machines. We see a pattern and we latch onto it and we start to believe that's the truth. But the truth is always more elusive than our patterns. Here's something nobody tells you in school. Feeling confused about magnets is a sign you're thinking clearly. When you encounter magnetism, really encounter it. Not just memorize formulas, but actually think about what it means that there's this invisible force reaching across space. And you feel this sense of, but why that won't go away. That's not intellectual failure. That's your brain recognizing it's touching something fundamental, something that doesn't reduce further. We've been taught to treat confusion as the enemy, as something to overcome, eliminate, resolve as quickly as possible. We think clarity means the absence of confusion. But this is wrong. Real clarity often includes confusion. It includes the honest recognition that some questions lead to ground-floor truths that don't have deeper answers. And being able to sit with that, to experience the phenomenon, to use the mathematics, to make predictions, all while maintaining a kind of productive confusion about the fundamental nature of what you're working with, that's the mark of genuine understanding. Einstein himself talked about this. He said the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious, that it's the source of all true art and science. Not mystery in the sense of we have no idea what's happening, but mystery in the sense of we can describe this mathematically, we can predict it precisely, and still it remains profoundly strange. Quantum mechanics is full of this. We have equations that predict outcomes with incredible accuracy. We can calculate the energy levels of hydrogen atoms to 10 decimal places. We can predict the behavior of semiconductors so precisely that we can build computers with billions of transistors. And yet the philosophical implications remain genuinely mysterious. What does it mean for a particle to be in superposition? What actually happens during wave function collapse? Is the wave function a real thing or just a mathematical tool? We can calculate it, we can use it, and we can still be productively confused about what it means. Magnets are the same. We know Maxwell's equations. We can engineer with them, build electric motors, generators, transformers, all the technology that powers modern civilization. And we can still ask, but what is a field, really? What does it mean for something to exist everywhere in space, to have a value at every point, but not be made of anything, and not have a satisfying answer? The lesson is this: stop treating confusion as the problem. Confusion is the price of admission to reality's deeper truths. If you're not confused, you're probably not looking closely enough. And here's the thing that's really wild. The confusion isn't a gap in knowledge that will eventually be filled. It's not like we're waiting for some future theory that will make everything clear and comfortable and mechanical again. The confusion is a feature of reality itself. Reality at its deepest levels is strange, deeply, irreducibly strange. And the better our theories get, the more accurately they describe what's actually happening, the stranger it gets. Quantum mechanics is stranger than classical mechanics. Quantum field theory is stranger than quantum mechanics. Each layer of deeper understanding reveals more strangeness, not less. And this is actually wonderful. This is a gift, because it means reality is inexhaustible. There's always more mystery to explore, always deeper questions to ask. You never hit a point where you understand everything, and there's nothing left to wonder about. The confusion is an invitation. It's reality saying, come deeper. Be willing to be amazed. Don't settle for comfortable lies when you can have uncomfortable truths. Let me tell you why this matters beyond magnets. Why this whole thing about accepting fundamentals and being okay with mystery is about more than just physics. The demand that everything be explained in familiar terms is one of the most destructive habits of modern thinking, because it makes us believe that anything we can't immediately grasp is somehow suspect, somehow not real, somehow less trustworthy than the mechanical, intuitive, everyday experiences we're comfortable with. But here's the truth. Reality doesn't owe you familiarity. Quantum mechanics isn't weird because it's wrong. It's weird because the universe at small scales doesn't behave like the universe at human scales. And we evolved to navigate the human scale, not the quantum scale. Our intuitions, powerful as they are, were shaped by a very narrow slice of reality. Your brain evolved to help you avoid predators, find food, navigate social relationships, throw spears at moving targets. It did not evolve to understand quantum mechanics or relativity or the behavior of magnetic fields at a fundamental level. So when these things feel weird and counterintuitive, that's not the universe being strange. That's your intuitions bumping up against their limits. Relativity isn't confusing because Einstein made a mistake. It's confusing because space-time actually behaves in ways that contradict our everyday experience of separate, absolute space and time. Time really does slow down when you move fast. Space really does curve around massive objects. These aren't metaphors. They're literal descriptions of reality, confirmed by countless experiments. And magnetism seems mysterious because it's a direct experience of a fundamental force that you can't see or touch, only feel indirectly through its effects. Your brain wasn't built with magnetic field detectors. Some birds have them. Some bacteria have them, but you don't. You experience magnetism through its consequences, and that feels strange. But strange doesn't mean not real. In fact, the strangeness is often a signal. This is reality showing you that it's bigger, richer, and more complex than the models you carry around in your head. The profound implication is this: if you want to understand reality deeply, you have to be willing to let it be unfamiliar. You have to be willing to stand in that discomfort where your intuitions don't help anymore, where the only guides are mathematics, careful observation, and the willingness to accept that some things are exactly what they are without needing to be something else first. This is the difference between cramming reality into your existing worldview and expanding your worldview to accommodate reality. Most people do the former. They take anything that doesn't fit and either reject it or twist it until it sort of matches what they already believe. This feels safe, comfortable. But it's a prison. You end up living in a smaller and smaller world where nothing challenges you, nothing surprises you, nothing invites you to grow. The latter, expanding your mind to fit reality, is uncomfortable, disorienting, humbling. But it's also the only path to genuine understanding. It's the only way to actually see what's there instead of just seeing your own projections. Magnets are asking, which path are you willing to take? Now here's where this gets beautiful. Once you accept that magnetism is fundamental, once you stop demanding it be something else, you can start to see what it actually is. And what it is astonishing. Magnetism isn't separate from electricity. They're two faces of the same underlying phenomenon, electromagnetism. A moving electric field creates a magnetic field. A moving magnetic field creates an electric field. They're woven together in space-time itself, dancing with each other, transforming into each other depending on your frame of reference. This is what Maxwell showed us in the 1860s. And it's one of the most beautiful insights in all of physics. That light itself, the stuff illuminating this room, carrying information from stars billions of years old, is an electromagnetic wave. It's electricity and magnetism rippling through space, sustaining each other, propagating at the universe's speed limit. You see what happened there? By accepting electromagnetism as fundamental, by not trying to reduce it to something more familiar, we discovered that it explained something we thought was completely different. We unified disparate phenomena. We found deeper patterns. This is what happens when you work with fundamental forces instead of against them. You don't get less understanding. You get more. You get to see how different pieces of reality fit together, how the same underlying truth expresses itself in multiple ways. And there's something almost spiritual about this, about the recognition that the universe is put together from a surprisingly small number of fundamental ingredients, and that everything you see around you, is just these ingredients in different combinations, different configurations, different dances. 4 fundamental forces: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force. That's it. That's the recipe for stars and galaxies and biology and consciousness and love and every magnet you've ever played with. Gravity holds planets in orbit and makes apples fall. Electromagnetism holds atoms together and makes magnets stick. The strong force holds atomic nuclei together despite the electromagnetic repulsion between protons. The weak force enables certain kinds of radioactive decay and powers the sun. 4 forces. And from those 4 forces, plus some matter and energy, you get the entire cosmos. You get galaxies spinning in the void. You get stars fusing hydrogen into heavier elements. You get planets with atmospheres and oceans. You get chemistry and biology and evolution, and eventually you get nervous systems complex enough to wonder about magnets. The wisdom is this: when you stop fighting fundamentals and start exploring them, you discover unity. Simplicity beneath complexity. Pattern beneath chaos. And this unity is emotionally powerful, not just intellectually interesting. Because it means you're not separate from the universe. You're not some observer standing outside looking in. You're made of the same stuff. The electromagnetic forces holding your atoms together are the same forces making magnets stick to your fridge. You are the universe experiencing itself. And magnets are one of the ways that experience becomes conscious, becomes aware of its own fundamental nature. Okay, so your brain might be reorganizing itself right now. You might be looking at everything around you differently, seeing the invisible fields, the fundamental forces, the mystery hiding in plain sight. But here's the question. What do you do with this? How do you take this new way of seeing and actually apply it to your life? Because understanding isn't just intellectual, it's practical. It changes how you move through the world. Here's your first tool, and it's simple. When someone explains something to you, ask yourself, is this fundamental or is this a translation? Next time someone tells you how something works, a machine, a relationship, a political system, anything, notice if they're describing the thing itself, or if they're using analogies and comparisons. Notice if they're pointing you toward direct experience, or if they're giving you a comforting story. Both can be useful, but they're different kinds of understanding. If someone says a magnet works like tiny hands reaching out, that's a translation. It might help you predict behavior, but it's not showing you the thing itself. If someone says, bring these 2 magnets close and feel the force between them, that's magnetism, that's one of the fundamental forces. They're inviting you toward direct experience. Practice this distinction. Not to reject translations, they're useful, but to know when you're being given a map versus when you're being shown the territory. And here's the key. When you hit something that can't be translated, something fundamental, don't treat that as a failure of explanation. Treat it as an invitation to experience the thing directly, to sit with its irreducibility, to let it be strange and real and exactly what it is. This works with emotions too. If you're sad and someone asks, why are you sad? Sometimes there's a story. I'm sad because this thing happened, because I lost something, because I'm disappointed. But sometimes sadness is fundamental. It's just there, a state of being that doesn't reduce to a neat narrative. And that's okay. The sadness doesn't need a story to be valid. Same with joy. Same with love. Same with any deep feeling. Sometimes you can trace it to causes, and sometimes it's just there, fundamental, a basic color in the palette of human experience. Start noticing what's fundamental in your life. And stop demanding that fundamental things explain themselves in terms of something else. Second practice. Develop the habit of remembering that your models are tools, not truths. You have mental models for everything. How relationships work, how success happens, how the world operates, how people should behave, what's good and what's bad. These models are useful. They help you navigate, predict, plan. But they're not the territory. They're maps. And maps can be wrong. Maps can be outdated. Maps can mislead you in new terrain. So practice this. When you're absolutely certain about something, pause. Ask yourself, is this certainty about the thing itself? Or is this certainty about my model of the thing? Example. You might be certain your partner is angry with you, but that's not direct observation. That's a model. You noticed tone of voice, body language, specific words, and your brain ran a pattern-matching algorithm that outputs anger. But maybe they're tired. Maybe they're anxious. Maybe they're processing something complex that doesn't fit neatly into your anger/not anger categories. The model is useful as a starting point, but holding it lightly means you can update it, revise it, discard it when direct experience contradicts it. With magnets, this looks like enjoying the iron filings demonstration while remembering the patterns aren't the field itself. Using the north/south pole model while remembering it's a simplification of something more complex. Appreciating Maxwell's equations while maintaining a sense of awe that these mathematical structures somehow map to reality. In life, this looks like being humble enough to say, I thought this was true, but I'm updating based on new information. It looks like curiosity instead of defensiveness when your models fail. It looks like wisdom. I'll tell you something personal. I've been wrong about so many things in my life. I've had models of how physics works that turned out to be incomplete or just plain wrong. I've had models of how people work that were naive or unfair. And every time I discover I'm wrong, there's this moment of discomfort, this ego blow, but I've learned to love that moment. Because it means I'm about to get smarter. It means reality is teaching me something. And the only cost is letting go of a model I was attached to. The people who suffer the most are the ones who can't do this, who hold their models so tightly that they'd rather distort reality than update the model. You see this everywhere. In politics, in relationships, in science sometimes, in every domain of human life. The practice is simply this. Hold everything lightly. Be willing to be wrong. Be delighted when you discover you're wrong, because it means you're learning. Third practice. Prioritize direct experience over conceptual understanding whenever possible. Don't just read about magnets, play with them. Feel the pull, the resistance, the snap when they connect. Notice how the force changes with distance. Observe how they twist to align. Feel how if you try to push like poles together, there's this soft resistance, this invisible cushion of force. This seems simple, but it's profound, because direct experience bypasses the storytelling part of your brain and lets you encounter reality more nakedly. And this applies to everything. Don't just read about meditation. Sit and breathe and notice what actually happens in your mind. Don't just study music theory. Listen, really listen, and feel what the sounds do to your body. Don't just learn about love. Pay attention to the actual felt experience of caring for someone. Concepts are useful, theories are useful, but they're all maps. And if you spend your whole life reading maps without ever visiting the territory, you'll have knowledge without understanding. The practice is this. At least once a day, stop conceptualizing something and just experience it. If you're drinking coffee, don't think about caffeine molecules binding to adenosine receptors in your brain. Just taste it. Feel the warmth. Notice the bitterness and the sweetness. Be present with the experience. If you're walking, don't think about biomechanics and muscle contractions. Just feel your body move, the weight shifting from foot to foot, the rhythm of your breath, the air on your skin. If you're with someone you love, don't analyze the relationship. Don't narrate it to yourself. Don't compare it to other relationships or measure it against some ideal. Just be present with them. See them. Feel what it's like to share space with them. This trains your brain to value direct contact with reality instead of only trusting the stories you tell about reality. And over time, this changes everything. You become less stuck in your head, less trapped by models that don't serve you, more alive to what's actually happening. I do this with physics sometimes. I'll be working on a problem, deep in the mathematics, and I'll stop and just think about what the equations are describing, not abstractly, but concretely. Particles moving, fields oscillating, energy transforming. I'll try to feel it, to imagine it as vividly as possible, and sometimes that direct engagement, that attempt to experience the phenomenon instead of just manipulating symbols, that's when insight comes. When I see the solution or understand why something has to be a certain way. The math is the map. The phenomenon is the territory. And you need both, but you can't confuse them. Final practice. Cultivate a different relationship with confusion. Most people treat confusion as a red flag. I don't understand this. Something's wrong. I need to fix this immediately or give up. But what if confusion is actually a signal that you're at the edge of your current understanding? That you're touching something real that doesn't fit your existing categories? Practice this. When you feel confused about something, pause. Instead of immediately trying to resolve it or running away from it, sit with it. Ask, what is this confusion trying to show me? Maybe it's showing you that your mental model needs expansion. Maybe it's showing you that you're encountering something fundamental that doesn't reduce further. Maybe it's showing you that reality is more complex than you thought. With magnets, this looks like letting yourself feel the weirdness of action at a distance, letting yourself sit with the strangeness of invisible fields, not rushing to a comfortable analogy, but dwelling in the mystery long enough to get comfortable with it. In life, this looks like not having all the answers. It looks like saying, I don't know, without shame. It looks like staying curious instead of defensive when your worldview gets challenged. The reframe is this. Confusion isn't the opposite of understanding. Clarity that pretends certainty where there isn't any, that's the opposite of understanding. Confusion that opens you to wonder and keeps you exploring, that's the beginning of wisdom. So the next time you're genuinely confused, instead of thinking I'm failing, try thinking I'm at an edge. Something real is here. Let me pay attention. This single shift, from treating confusion as failure to treating it as invitation, will change how you learn, how you grow, how you encounter the parts of life that don't make easy sense. I'll give you an example. When I first encountered quantum mechanics, I was confused, deeply confused. Particles behaving like waves, waves behaving like particles, the uncertainty principle, superposition, all of it felt wrong. It contradicted everything I thought I knew about how reality works. And I had a choice. I could reject it, say this is nonsense, it can't be right, or I could trust the mathematics, trust the experiments, and sit with the confusion until it transformed into something else. I chose the latter, and what happened was, the confusion didn't go away exactly. But it changed. It became a productive confusion, a generative confusion. It became the fuel for deeper questions, better experiments, new insights. And eventually I realized the confusion was telling me something important. That my intuitions about how reality should work were just intuitions. They weren't laws of nature. They were habits of thought shaped by a very limited range of experiences. Reality doesn't care about my intuitions. And once I accepted that, once I let reality be strange, I could work with it instead of against it. That's what confusion is offering you, the chance to let reality be bigger than your current understanding of it. And that's it. That's the toolkit. 4 practices that extend the magnet lesson into the rest of your life. When someone explains something, ask if it's fundamental or translation. Hold your models lightly. Seek direct experience. Embrace productive confusion. But before we end, I need to tell you something important. Something about what this all means for how you see yourself and your place in a universe built from invisible forces. So here we are at the end, and maybe you came here thinking you'd learn a fact about magnets. Maybe you thought I'd give you a mechanism, a little story with parts that fit together neatly, a comfortable explanation you could memorize and repeat. But what I hope you got instead is something bigger, a different way of relating to reality itself. Because the misconception about magnets, the idea that they should be explainable in familiar, comfortable terms, is the same misconception we carry about everything that challenges us. We think mystery is a problem to solve. We think confusion is a weakness. We think that if we can't fit something into the models we already have, then either the thing is broken or we are. But magnets showed us something else. They showed us that some things are fundamental, that reality doesn't owe us familiarity, that the deepest understanding often comes not from translating the strange into the familiar, but from expanding ourselves to meet reality on its own terms. You are living in a universe held together by invisible forces, forces you can feel but never fully see, forces that don't reduce to simpler explanations because they are the simple explanations. They're the ground floor, the alphabet, the fundamental truths from which everything else follows. Gravity pulling you toward the Earth, electromagnetic forces holding your atoms together, the strong force binding quarks into protons and neutrons, the weak force enabling the sun to shine. And once you accept that, once you stop demanding reality be smaller, simpler, more comfortable than it is, something extraordinary happens. You become more alive, more curious, more capable of genuine wonder. Because here's what I've learned in a lifetime of doing physics. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. It's under no obligation to fit your intuitions or satisfy your desire for familiar mechanisms. But if you're willing to meet it where it is, if you're willing to expand your mind to accommodate what's actually true instead of shrinking truth to fit your mind, then it will show you things more beautiful than you can imagine. The electromagnetic field isn't just some abstract concept, it's the reason you can see. Light is electromagnetic waves, and your eyes are detectors for a narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. Every color you've ever seen, every sunset, every face you've loved, that's electromagnetism. It's the reason you can think. Your neurons communicate through electrical signals, and the structure of those neurons is held together by electromagnetic forces between atoms. It's the reason you exist at all. Chemistry is applied quantum electrodynamics. Every bond between atoms, every reaction in your cells, every breath you take, that's electromagnetic forces at work. You're not separate from these forces. You are these forces, organized in a particular way, complex enough to wonder about themselves. And magnets, simple refrigerator magnets, are one of the most direct ways you can feel this truth. When you hold two magnets and feel them pull together or push apart, you're feeling one of the fundamental forces of nature directly. No intermediary, no mechanism, just pure force acting across space. That should blow your mind every single time. So here's what I want you to remember. You're not broken because some things confuse you. You're not failing because the universe refuses to fit into neat boxes. You're not missing something when you feel the mystery in magnets, in love, in consciousness, in the fact that anything exists at all. You're just finally paying attention. The mantra I want to leave you with is this. I don't need to translate everything to understand it. I can experience reality directly. I can hold my models lightly. I can let fundamental things be fundamental. And that's not ignorance. That's wisdom. Take that with you. Let it change how you approach every confusing, beautiful, irreducible thing you encounter. Because there are magnets everywhere. Not just in physics, but in life. Places where mystery doesn't mean absence of understanding. Places where the deepest truth is just, this is real, this is fundamental, and that's enough. Places where the only honest answer is, This is one of the ways the universe is built, and instead of being disappointed by that answer, you can be amazed by it. You can stand in that foundational truth and feel grateful that reality is strange enough, rich enough, mysterious enough to keep surprising you. If this shifted something in you, if you're seeing magnets or reality or yourself differently now, let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what resonated, what confused you, what made you think, what questions are you sitting with now, what fundamental truths are you noticing in your own life. And if you want more of this kind of exploration, where we take something you thought you understood and crack it open to find the deeper patterns, subscribe. Because there's so much more to talk about. So many more places where our comfortable assumptions hide the wildest truths. We could talk about time, about why it seems to flow in one direction when the fundamental laws of physics are time-symmetric. We could talk about quantum entanglement, about how particles separated by vast distances remain connected in ways that seem to violate our intuitions about locality. We could talk about emergence, about how complexity arises from simplicity, how consciousness emerges from unconscious matter. Every one of these topics is a doorway into the same truth. That reality is stranger and more beautiful than our everyday experience suggests. That the universe is built from fundamental truths that don't reduce further, and that the willingness to encounter these truths directly, without demanding they be translated into something more comfortable, is the beginning of wisdom. Until next time, stay curious, stay confused, and never apologize for touching the mystery, because the mystery is where the truth lives. The mystery is the invitation, and the only thing you need to accept that invitation is the courage to let reality be exactly what it is. The magnets have been trying to teach you this all along. Every time you felt that invisible force, every time you marveled at action at a distance, every time you asked but why and didn't get a satisfying answer, that was the universe saying, I'm more than you think. I'm stranger than you imagine, and if you're willing to let me be strange, I'll show you wonders. So go find some magnets, feel the force, sit with the mystery. And remember, you're not trying to solve a puzzle, you're encountering a fundamental truth, one of the basic ingredients of reality. And that's not a problem to overcome, that's a gift to receive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being curious enough to wonder about magnets, about reality, about what it all means. That curiosity is precious. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Don't let anyone tell you that questions without comfortable answers aren't worth asking. The best questions are the ones that lead you to the edge of understanding and invite you to stand there, confused and amazed, staring into the fundamental nature of what is. That's where I've spent my life, at that edge. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.